All right, hello. My name is Aaron, and I had another installment of, I guess, a deep dive or just a bit of a exploration into a character, or in this case, a group of characters, in one of my favorite series of stories, collection of stories, which is Harry Potter. Um, and the two characters that I want to explore today, which could really almost be combined into one character, is Fred and George Weasley. Um, they are side characters, but I've been thinking about them a little bit over the past couple weeks, and the role that they play within this story. Because on the on the surface, Fred and George can seem very kind of superfluous. I think is how um, educated individuals would say that word. Is their role in the story can seem a little superfluous. They are not necessarily uh, they're not main characters, and they're side characters, but I think they're important side characters. But they never their antics and their whole persona is kind of this rule breaking, very unserious group of or pair of twins that never really. It can seem like they never really do anything important, but there actually are quite a few little tiny important acts. Not even necessarily tiny. There are quite a few important acts that these twins commit throughout the story, and also I think one very important overarching act and kind of role that they fit into within the story. So, um, a few tinier, a few smaller things that they do that are clearly important are they provide Harry with the Marauders map, which is kind of an invaluable resource when it comes to what Harry needs to do. There are multiple times where he uses it in moments of kind of dire need and there are also kind of clues that the Marauders map uncover that help certain things come into light. So an example of these would be in The Prisoner of Azkaban, when Harry is kind of sneaking around the castle in the middle of the night because he saw Peter Pettigrew on the Marauders map, which Peter Pettigrew is supposed to have been dead, supposed to have been killed by Sirius Black, who at this point in the story is believed to be a more evil and malevolent character than he actually is. And so this seeing of Peter Pettigrew and his ultimate telling of Lupin that he saw Peter Pettigrew, who is actually one of the creators of the Marauders map, that is not really expressed until much later in the book, if ever. I don't. In the book, I know it's expressed at some point, but in the movies, I'm not totally sure they ever do fully uncover that. They might have, and it might be slipping my mind. But anyway, that scene and that seeing of Peter Pettigrew on the map is kind of where the seed of Sirius Black actually might not have done this begins, and it also ultimately exonerates him when they find Peter Pettigrew is an animagus, and he's been hiding in the Weasley family for the last 12 years as a rat. So yeah, it's and then a kind of smaller thing, but of equal import, I would say, is Harry makes use of kind of the trinkets, the inventions that Fred and George create that are meant to be a little bit more silly, but also have some serious utility in the quest that Harry's undertaken. In one scene, he uses Peruvian darkness powder to kind of get a more to spy on Malfoy and kind of get an idea of what Malfoy's up to, because Harry never trusts Malfoy, as he probably shouldn't. Although Malfoy is um, not as bad as one would originally think. It's not that he didn't do any bad things or intend to do any bad things, but um, I think Malfoy is worth a deep dive, and I'll do that in the future. And I think it will be not as scathing as one might think. And I think a rationally minded person would also see that Malfoy is not necessarily a malevolent character within the book. He's just kind of. I'll do a deep dive on him. But yeah, he does that to spy on Malfoy. He uses that little piece of of paraphernalia of spy paraphernalia. I guess it would be in this context, although it probably was not created for that context. And then also he uses these little noisemakers. I think kind of they're uh, they're represented differently in the book and in the movies. In the book, I can't actually remember how they're represented, but in the movies, they're like these little horns. He drops these horns on the ground, and they multiply into a bunch of different horns while people are working at the Ministry of Magic, and that distracts them, so he can then slip into Professor Umbridge's office while he's looking for the Horcrux. And a lot doesn't come out of that because he doesn't find it in her office, but it just goes to show that there is utility in the kind of the seemingly non-important antics that Fred and George take part in. And one and kind of the overarching idea that I think Fred and George really represent within the book is kind of this unbreakable force of fun, but also goodness and light. You know, they're kind of while they might not seem to be the most, not everything that they do is done for the most kind of morally upstanding reasons. They're not. There's a lot of shirking of seeming responsibility. They kind of help people miss class and things like that, and things that classically are represented as kind of lazy and not the most upstanding of things to do, but in kind of in the aggregate, in the whole of the story, they actually are these very focused and determined and kind of ingenious individuals who are kind of determined on their seeking of fun and of just levity, just jokes, and I think that's actually a really important part that they kind of fill in this story, because the kind of constant levity and happiness that they represent seems to last through the entirety of the story, until quite possibly the very end. But you know, you see in the Half Blood Prince. Hang on, is it the Half Blood Prince? Yes, in the Half Blood Prince. Or is that the first Deathly Hallows? That's the first Deathly Hallows. I apologize. In the first Deathly Hallows, when they are moving Harry from his house um, to the burrow, you see George or Fred. I can't remember which one it is, but one of them gets their ear blown off, and the first thing he says when he regains consciousness, because he's left unconscious, and when he regains consciousness, he cracks a joke, and you also see the kind of the joke shop that these two have opened is in Diagon Alley, and they go there in the sixth book and the sixth movie, and when they go there, you see Diagon Alley is kind of this dark and closed down place. No shops are really open. Everything's really dark. There's kind of this dark air about the place, and the only place that's open and kind of bright and colorful is Fred and George's joke shop, and it's also insanely busy. And so it just goes to show that that people are in those dark times are looking for light and levity and jokes, because comedy is a very potent thing when things seem dark. It can add that element of levity, and I don't want to say unimportantness, but it can to poke fun at something is not necessarily to say that it's unimportant, but it is to kind of draw attention to it in a way that is not as threatening, I would say, because comedy can kind of make things seem not as dreadful as they are. If you're serious about everything, everything kind of carries this weight of seriousness. But if you kind of step back and realize that life is not life, and the things that happen within our life are just not as serious as they often seem, or then you kind of have this ability to laugh and kind of joke through things, and not all things. I mean, there's obviously kind of a spectrum when it comes to that, but I think that is um, a really important part that Fred and George play within this series of stories, and it's also one of the reasons. And they're also just kind of lovable because I think everyone can kind of, a lot of people can relate to this kind of character trope of a little devious, but not in any malevolent way, just kind of in a fun and a relatable way. A lot of people, I'm sure, can relate to skipping homework or skipping class to do something fun, or just kind of bucking the system a little bit in order to appreciate your own kind of sense of comedy and fun, and so yeah, I mean, I think that's actually a really important role because it and it's not the most important role, and they are side characters, um but I think it's within the story, it is something that needs something that adds a little depth to what's going on, and a little extra. Um, yeah, it's there. I think they're important characters because each character can't be everything, and sometimes you need some side characters to add certain elements to a story, and I think they certainly do that. I think and they, they kind of, there are similar characters in a lot of different stories. Trying to think of some. Lord of the Rings, you might say it's someone like, well, there's kind of a Merry and Pippin. They seem to me to kind of be a similar character trope. They're not, and kind of almost the hobbits in general, but Samwise and Frodo are a little bit more serious, and Merry and Pippin are kind of this light. Uh, Even when they're being like captured by orcs, they're like making jokes, um, and it almost seems to be that there's just an air of unseriousness and an air of everything's gonna be okay, even if it's not gonna be okay. Type of personality that these two kind of represent. So it's, I think it's an important aspect in not only in this story, but in life, just to have a little bit of levity and the ability to laugh at yourself and to laugh at the situations that go around you. And things might not always be funny in the moment, but it's important to, I think, eventually move past whatever seriousness you might feel towards a certain happening, and just understand it for what it is, which is just something that happened, and tomorrow exists, and it it people probably won't remember it tomorrow, and you probably won't remember it in a few tomorrows. So it's just life is a little too short to be so caught up in the seriousness of it. um, and that's not even necessarily to say that you shouldn't take things seriously. It's just, it's kind of this idea of, you know you don't want to be too serious, you don't want to be too comedic, you don't want to take nothing seriously, but you don't want to take everything too seriously. You kind of want to walk down that Taoist path. You got yin and yang. Yin is too serious, yang is not serious enough, and you want to walk right down the middle, kind of have one foot in each side, and be able to appreciate both both modes of being. And so yeah, and the last thing I would probably say is, I think that's why the death of George. Oh man, see, they're so interconnected. I can never even remember what happens to which one. But in the end, I think Fred dies, and it might have been George. I think it's Fred. One of them dies, and it's a really, really sad scene. It's a really devastating, because in all their levity and um, their comedic nature, they almost seem, they kind of have this air of invincibility about them. Um, because when you're constantly not being when you're constantly not letting the world around you affect your ability to laugh and to just kind of carry on, then you kind of do have this. You'll kind of project this air of invincibility, like, well, nothing really gets to me, so do your worst. And then when Fred dies, it's that much more shocking and devastating. And I think they do a really good job of of representing that in the books and especially the movies. Actually, that was a really powerful scene when kind of the Battle of Hogwarts enters kind of this intermission, and they're kind of gathering everyone who's died and been injured in the Great Hall of Hogwarts, and you see Fred and Tonks and Lupin, and a lot of people have been killed, and the scene of where Fred's family is around him is very impactful and well done. There's some really good acting. Unpopular opinion, not unpopular, but Rupert Grint did a really amazing job throughout that whole movie. Emma Watson did a really great job throughout that whole movie. Daniel Radcliffe I don't think he's that good of an actor. He's good in some moments. He does overall a good job, I would say. But man, that guy cannot fake cry to save his life. And that's just one man's opinion, but it's also the correct opinion. So don't at me for that one. But yeah, and but I think they're an important character duo in the story. Their constant levity and air of lightness, kind of it provides sustenance to not only kind of the people around them, but also themselves. Provides this kind of immortality, and immortality is not really the right word, but the idea of invincibleness to the side of good, because no matter what happens, there'll always be some weird little Fred and George trinket that will survive into the future, and you'll always have that little crumb of goodness, because I think they are ultimately a force for good. That seems pretty apparent. So yeah, I think that's all I'll say about Fred and George. I've been thinking about them for the past couple weeks or so, and I want to do more of these Harry Potter deep dives. I would like to explore a lot of different characters within the story. So look forward to those. And that's it. Sunday. Happy Sabbath. Don't do any work. Just chill. That's what I'm doing. Happy Sunday. Have a good next week. And I will see you in the future.